Good morning, students. In this part, we are going to see the development of the hindgut, which is the last part of development of gastrointestinal system. So the hindgut, it is that part of the primitive gut which lies or which is contained within the tail fold of the embryo. So if you see, this is the tail fold of the embryo. So in this this portion is nothing but the hindgut. Okay, and this extends from the posterior intestinal portal to the cloacal membrane here. So it extends from the posterior intestinal portal, which is the junction between the midgut and the hindgut. From that point to the cloacal membrane is the extent of the hindgut, and posteriorly it is suspended by a primitive dorsal mesentery. If you just see this orange shaded area, so that is the dorsal mesentery, so through which this hindgut suspends from the dorsal body wall, primitive dorsal mesentery. And this primitive dorsal mesentery, it conveys the inferior mesenteric artery. This is the inferior mesenteric artery, which is the blood supply to the hindgut. All the derivatives of the hindgut are supplied by the branches coming from the inferior mesenteric artery. And caudally, if you just see, this is the hindgut, right? So caudally it extends into the tail fold, or the rudimentary tail here. The part of the hindgut will extend into this rudimentary tail, which is called as post-anal gut or tail gut. This portion is called as post-anal gut or tail gut of the hindgut. Okay, and rudimentary tail, anyway, it will regress later on, and this post-anal gut is incorporated into this the preceding part. Now the sagittal section of the endodermal cloaca, this is the endodermal cloaca and this is the sagittal section here. So if you just see, this is the hindgut. Ventrally the hindgut is drawn out as a diverticulum. Okay, this is drawn out as a diverticulum, and this diverticulum is called as allantois, which extends up to the fetal end of the umbilical cord. This blue lines what you are seeing here and here, that is the umbilical cord, right? So this allantois, this portion is the allantois. This will extend towards the fetal end of the umbilical cord, and this allantois will divide the hindgut into a pre-allantoic part and a post-allantoic part. So this hindgut is divided into a pre-allantoic part and a post-allantoic part by this allantois. And the pre-allantoic part, if you see, it is narrow and tubular, whereas the post-allantoic part, it is dilated to form the endodermal cloaca. So this dilated portion is called as endodermal cloaca. And the ventral wall of the cloaca here, ventral wall of the cloaca, it is formed by a bilaminar fold called as a cloacal membrane. So this is the cloacal membrane, and this is the part where the endoderm, this is the endoderm, and this is the surface ectoderm. So both endoderm and extoderm are closely adherent without the intervening mesoderm. Here there is no mesoderm seen, right? So endoderm and ectoderm are closely adherent at the cloacal membrane. Where else do we see these ectoderm and endoderm together? In the oral membrane we are going to see the same similar kind of picture there without the intervening mesoderm. And at first this cloacal membrane is elongated. Okay, it is elongated and limited on each side by a fold called as genital fold. You are seeing this fold, right? So this fold is called as genital fold by a raised margin, and this raised margin is nothing but the genital fold. So the mesodermal cells from the primitive streak, they actually migrate to this area, and ventrally, and they reach this area and form this rudimentary phallus here, rudimentary phallus, and the mesodermal cells within this area, they proliferate and they extend in between the umbilical cord and the cloacal membrane. So the mesodermal cells will proliferate here and they form the infraumbilical part of the anterior abdominal wall. Okay, so the mesodermal cells derived from the primitive streak, they reach this area, form the rudimentary phallus here, and then form the infraumbilical part of the anterior abdominal wall. And eventually what happens, this cloacal membrane, it will shift caudalwards, it will shift down. Okay, so here if you see, it has shifted down. From this position to, it has shifted down caudally and it becomes shortened. So the cloacal membrane will become short. It is shifted caudalwards and it is shortened once the infraumbilical part of the anterior abdominal wall is formed. Then now it forms a surface depression here. The cloacal membrane forms a surface depression, and this depression is called as ectodermal cloaca. Inner one is called as endodermal cloaca, whereas this surface depression is called as ectodermal cloaca. And subsequently, when the caudal edge of the urorectal septum, this is the urorectal septum. Okay, so this urorectal septum, it fuses transversely with the cloacal membrane here, and the ectodermal cloaca is now divided into two parts. Okay, this is the urorectal septum. It has fused with the ectodermal cloaca, and then this ectodermal cloaca is divided into two pits. What are they? One is the anal pit or the proctodium. This one is called as anal pit or the proctodium, and this is the urogenital membrane in the anterior part. This is also called as primitive urethral groove or primary urethral groove. This is called as primary urethral groove. Okay, so anteriorly the ectodermal cloaca is forming the urogenital membrane or the primary urethral groove, and posteriorly it is forming the anal pit or the proctodium. So this division is occurring when the urorectal septum will come and fuse with this ectodermal cloaca, dividing it into two parts, right? Now the pre-allantoic part of the hindgut. So this portion in this image, if we see, this is the allantois, right? So here this is the allantois. So this becomes the pre-allantoic part and this becomes the post-allantoic part. Okay, so this pre-allantoic part, it develops into the distal third of the transverse colon. The proximal third here it is derived from the midgut, right? So then the distal 1/3 of the transverse colon, then the ascending colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum and anal canal, they are all derived from this hindgut. Okay, so the pre-allantoic part, it is going to develop into the distal third of the transverse colon, the descending colon and the sigmoid colon, right? So pre-allantoic part is giving rise to these structures. The proximal part of the hindgut, it is pushed towards the left side during rotation of the midgut, right? So this is the proximal portion of the hindgut. It is pushed towards the left side during the rotation of the midgut. We have already seen that. And the inferior retention band, which is attached to the colic angle here, if you just remember the phrenico-colic ligament, I have discussed in the midgut class. So here this future left colic flexure, which is going to occur at this point, this is attached to the diaphragm through a fibrous band called as phrenico-colic ligament, and the dorsal mesentery usually disappears in the descending colon. This is all the descending colon part, the green thing what you are seeing. So here the dorsal mesentery is disappearing, whereas for the sigmoid colon it will be persistent to form the sigmoid mesocolon here. Okay, sigmoid mesocolon will be there, whereas for the descending colon it is all retroperitoneal, right? So there is no mesentery posteriorly, so it becomes retroperitoneal, this descending colon, whereas the sigmoid colon, the dorsal mesentery will persist to form the sigmoid mesocolon. Okay, then coming to the post-allantoic part of the hindgut or the endodermal cloaca. So the endodermal cloaca gives rise to the development of the rectum, upper part of the anal canal, and most of the mucous lining of the urinary bladder and urethra. So the post-allantoic part, or also called as the endodermal cloaca, this portion, right? So this is the allantois here. Yes. So this one becomes the post-allantoic part. This is the pre-allantoic part. So this post-allantoic part is also called as endodermal cloaca, right? So this endodermal cloaca gives rise to the development of rectum, upper part of the anal canal, and most of the mucous lining of urinary bladder and the urethra. So these are the derivatives of the post-allantoic part of the hindgut. Now coming to the development of rectum and anal canal. So these are developed from the endodermal cloaca, right, which is nothing but the post-allantoic part of the hindgut. So this is the post-allantoic part of the hindgut. And we have already seen that this urorectal septum is going to divide the endodermal cloaca into two parts. What are the two parts? Primitive urogenital sinus, right? This is the primitive urogenital sinus, and then the anorectal canal here. Okay, so this is the anorectal canal. So endodermal cloaca, it is divided into a ventral primitive urogenital sinus and a dorsal anorectal canal, right? The primitive rectum or the anorectal canal. So this urorectal septum is coronally partitioned. So here we are seeing the section of the this is urorectal septum. So this urorectal septum is coronally oriented partition. This is coronally oriented partition. So here we are seeing the anterior view. This consists of three elements here. Okay, a vertical element and two lateral elements, right? So this rectum, this urorectal septum, in the process of development, it is formed as three parts. Okay, one vertical segment and then two lateral segments. So this vertical segment, is also called as the Tornix fold. Okay, Tornix fold, and grows caudally. So this vertical segment is growing caudally from the angle between the allantois and the hindgut here. Okay, from the angle between the allantois and the hindgut, it is growing vertically downwards, the vertical fold. And the lateral elements here, these two are the lateral elements. They are called as fold of Rathke or Rathke's folds. So they project inwards from each lateral wall of the cloaca. So they are projecting inwards from this lateral wall. Okay, and they are growing towards each other. These three elements grow towards each other and they fuse to form the septum, right? So each Rathke's fold here, this Rathke's fold contains a mesonephric or that is also called as Wolffian duct, and a paramesonephric or the Mullerian ducts. Okay, so this fold here, we are seeing the fold of Rathke. Okay, so in a transverse section we are seeing this fold of Rathke. In the Rathke's fold we are seeing the mesonephric duct laterally and paramesonephric duct medially. Okay, within this Rathke's fold, which is nothing but a part of the urorectal septum. Okay, then this septum has totally formed, dividing it into a posterior primitive rectum and anterior urogenital sinus, right? Then One point to be noted here is mesonephric duct is placed lateral to the paramesonephric duct. And these three elements, this is the vertical fold or the Tornix fold and the two lateral fold or the folds of Rathke, they all fuse to form the composite urorectal septum, and this urorectal septum extends caudally towards the cloacal membrane. Okay, this extends towards the cloacal membrane here. This septum is extending towards the cloacal membrane. Okay. At first, a gap known as the cloacal duct, this is the cloacal duct, appears between the caudal free edge of the urorectal septum and the cloacal membrane. This is the cloacal membrane, right? So between the cloacal membrane and the caudal portion of the urorectal septum, a cloacal duct is present. A gap is present in the beginning, and through this duct, the primitive rectum and the urogenital sinus, they communicate with each other. These two portions, they communicate with each other initially. Okay, for temporarily, for some time, this communication is present in the fetal life, right? And then at about the 7th week, the cloacal duct is closed, right? This cloacal duct is closed at about 7th week, and the urorectal septum fuses with the cloacal membrane and divides it into the urogenital membrane here. This is the urogenital membrane and the anal membrane. So the cloacal membrane is now divided into two parts by the fusion of the urorectal septum. One is urogenital membrane and the other one is the anal membrane. Okay, so the transverse line of fusion between the septum and the cloacal membrane forms the future perineal body. Okay, so if you just remember the pelvic diaphragm lecture, therein what is the perineal body I have discussed. So this point of fusion between the transverse line of fusion between the urorectal septum and the cloacal membrane persists as or forms the future perineal body. Okay, and the ectodermal cloaca behind the perineal body here presents a surface depression. This is nothing but the proctodium. Okay, surface depression called as proctodium or anal pit. And the backward growth of the perineal body separates the anal membrane from the urogenital membrane. So here perineal body will be growing backwards, and then it separates this urogenital membrane from the anal membrane. Okay, and the underlying mesenchymal cells proliferate around the proctodium, and that makes this proctodium more deeper. Okay, the mesodermal cells are there here, right? So the underlying mesodermal cells, they will proliferate and increase the depth of this proctodium. And finally, the anal membrane ruptures and the rectum communicates with the exterior through the anal canal. So this is the rectum, this is the anal canal, and both of them, they are communicating exteriorly once this anal membrane will rupture. Okay. And the position of the anal membrane is represented in the adult by the pectinate line of the anal canal. Okay, I'll show you that in the next image. So pectinate line of the anal canal, and so the anal canal is developed from two sources. Upper part of the anal canal from the endodermal cloaca, whereas the lower part is from the ectodermal proctodium. So the lower part of the anal canal is derived from the ectodermal proctodium. So here the same thing we can see. This is the anorectal canal. So the upper portion of the anal canal is derived from the endodermal cloaca, whereas the lower portion is derived from the ectodermal proctodium. Okay. Yeah, in this image, this is the pectinate line, right? So this portion is the anal canal and this upper part is the rectum, right? So rectum and upper portion of the anal canal, it is derived from the endodermal cloaca, whereas the lower portion of the anal canal, it is derived from the ectodermal proctodium. So from proctodium and from the hindgut. So that is the development, that is that means the anal canal is derived from two parts, hindgut as well as from the proctodium. Then in this image we are seeing some anomalies related to the development of hindgut. So there are congenital anomalies of the hindgut and here these are the fistulas. So fistula is one communication when there is a defective formation of the urorectal septum. The closure of the cloacal duct, if it hasn't occurred, if there is any deformity in the formation of the urorectal septum, then we are going to come across these fistulas. One is rectovesical fistula. So this one here, if we see, this is the rectum, okay, and this is the urinary bladder. So this is rectovesical fistula. Okay, rectovesical fistula, and here the anal pit, the anal membrane is not ruptured. Okay, then rectovesical fistula or a high fistula, it is when the three elements of the urorectal septum, that is the vertical and the two lateral folds, they fail to approximate, they are not coming closer. So the cloacal duct will persist at a higher level and the rectum communicates to the urinary bladder here, usually in the region of the internal trigone. So this high rectovesical fistula is at the level of internal trigone. So this is rectovesical fistula. Another one is rectourethral or rectovaginal fistula also is there. So this one is vagina here. Okay, so rectovaginal fistula, here we are seeing rectovaginal fistula. This is the another one, I'll tell you, I'll discuss that. This is the rectovaginal fistula here. So you can see the communication between the rectum and the vagina here. So in this, what happens, the vertical element of the urorectal septum grows normally, but the lateral folds of Rathke fail to grow inwards. So that results in the cloacal duct persistence in the lower part. So this defect, what happens in male, the rectum communicates with the urethra, okay, whereas urethra usually at the level of colliculus seminalis of the prostatic urethra. So that is called as rectourethral fistula in males. Whereas in females, what happens, the presence of the Mullerian ducts complicate the picture. So the rectum communicates with the upper part of the vagina. So if you remember, in Rathke's fold we have mesonephric and paramesonephric ducts, right? So Mullerian duct is nothing but what is the other name for the Mullerian duct? It is the paramesonephric duct, which gives rise to the female reproductive organs, right? So because the Rathke's fold has got the Mullerian duct, and failure of inward growth of the lateral folds will result in the formation of rectovaginal fistula in the females, whereas rectourethral fistula at the level of colliculus seminalis of prostatic urethra in the males. Okay, so that is rectourethral or rectovaginal fistula. And this one here, rectoperineal fistula. So here the rectum is communicating with the perineum. Okay, and here if you see, this is the urethra and this is the vagina here, and this is the imperforate anus. This picture is showing the imperforate anus. So in this, what is happening in this condition, the primary defect is the maybe, I mean, this could be a primary one or it could be secondary to the rectal fistulae. So imperforate anus may be caused by failure of rupture of anal membrane or non-development of ectodermal proctodium. Here ectodermal proctodium will not form, or the anal membrane, when it is formed, it is not ruptured, or atresia of the lower part of the rectum also can result in the imperforate anus. Okay. So one more point is the ectopic anus. So imperforate anus we have seen, rectovaginal fistula, here the rectourethral fistula, and this is rectovesical fistula. So rectourethral in the males, okay. This one, when the Rathke's folds will not or will fail to grow inwards, that results in either rectourethral or rectovaginal fistula. And one more point is ectopic anus. So in ectopic anus, under normal conditions, the perineal body grows backwards and that separates the anal membrane from the urogenital membrane, right? But when the backward growth of the perineal body is arrested and the anal and the urogenital orifices lie close to each other, okay, anal and urogenital orifices, they lie close to each other in this condition. So in females, the anal and vaginal orifices may be situated within the vestibule, which is nothing but the cleft between the labia minora. In that cleft, that is the vestibule itself, you may see the opening of both vagina and as well as the rectum. Or in males, what happens, the anal orifice may appear at the base of the scrotum. So that means the perineal body, it is the growth of the perineal body backwards, it is arrested, so the anal membrane stays back more ventrally. So that's why in male the anal orifice may appear at the base of the scrotum, in the intrabulbar fossa of the spongy urethra, or at coronal sulcus of the glans penis. Okay, so that is the ectopic anus. One more anomaly related to the development of the hindgut is Hirschsprung's disease or congenital megacolon. So here this is the normal appearing or normal hindgut, right? Sigmoid mesocolon, rectum and anal canal, right? So here this is the normal one, and in the normal hindgut, what will be there? There will be nerve cells which are present in the myenteric and the submucous plexuses. Whereas in Hirschsprung's disease or congenital megacolon, what happens is a segment of the large gut. So this is the segment of the large gut. Usually the proximal usually this will be proximal to the anal canal. So this shows persistent narrowing since birth, right? And this narrowing is because of the congenital agenesis of nerve cells in the myenteric and submucous plexuses. So this narrowed segment of the gut, this is devoid of the parasympathetic innervation, and so this fails to respond to the waves of peristalsis. So this does not respond to the peristalsis, it stays narrowed down, right? So this narrowed segment of the gut, eventually what happens is the overactive sympathetic nerves induce a persistent spasm. Here parasympathetic nerves are not there, so sympathetic overactivity is there, and that will induce persistent spasm of the affected part of the gut. And the gut which is proximal to this narrowed or site of obstruction, this becomes distended. There is no fault of this segment, but this becomes distended because this part is failing to react to the peristalsis, right? And this anomaly can be treated surgically by resection of the constricted part. So this constricted part will be resected, and subsequent mobilization of the proximal dilated gut to the anal region. This part will be now joined with the anal region, and this narrowed part is removed surgically. So that's how the congenital megacolon can be treated. And one more thing is undivided cloaca. So when does the undivided cloaca result? When there is no formation of the urorectal septum. So that means urorectal septum fails to develop completely, and the undivided cloaca it opens to the exterior through a common perineal orifice. You can see this is the rectum, this is the urinary bladder, and this is the uterus and the vagina. right? All three, they are opening to the exterior through a single orifice, common perineal orifice, after the rupture of the cloacal membrane, right? And both the genitourinary, this is the urinary and this is the genital, genitourinary as well as the alimentary passages have a common perineal outlet. This is a normal phenomena in birds actually, but in humans it is an anomaly, wherein there is failure of formation of urorectal septum. Thank you.